do a quick introduction, Lou, and then John and Lee will take over. So I'm going to start off the presentation by trying to outline our rationale for the action research question. And in deciding a particular focus for it, we wanted to ensure that we didn't lose focus of what the Centre for Excellence aims and the vision of that project really is about. So sometimes it's quite easy to get distracted and do something, you know, that doesn't line itself very well with that. So we wanted to have a focus really about, you know, we know it's about improving teaching, learning and assessment in maths. We wanted something that at the end of it will produce some high quality resources, but also some effective teaching and learning approaches to go with that. Something else that Sarah and Tracy mentioned in the first presentation was about CPD. You know, it's an opportunity to look at professional development and use this as an opportunity for professional development. And if we get some of these strands right, then hopefully the idea is that we can see some good improvement in achievement and attainment in maths, particularly at GCSE and functional skills level 2, but also in other areas as well. So what was our central aim? Well, it was based on, next slide, please, John. A lot of teachers turn around and say, well, you know, our students can't, or my students can't do this because they can't think, or they don't want to think. Or, you know, this question requires thinking and it's something they're not good at. Something else was about connecting topic areas together. They cannot seem to link concepts, mathematical concepts together. But if we can get this right, and if we can get thinking right, we can get students to link concepts and topic areas together, then hopefully that will give them the confidence to access exam-style questions, GCSE functional skills, exam-style worded questions. So that led us to our central theme, which was, or is, problem solving. So that was our rationale, one of our rationale. Secondly, we know a lot of staff have lots of skills, experience, and knowledge. And so we wanted to combine the power of this and and use a collaborative planning approach to work on problem solving. Not just teachers, however, if we can do something that allows students to collaborate and work together, which is what research shows, then hopefully we can see some degree of success there. Next slide, please, John. John, are you still there? We're frozen.
Yeah.
Are we on the next slide?
Yeah, can you not see it?
Yeah.
Can everyone see the slide?
Brilliant. Now, this is not to say that we're going to have a pizza break or anything like that. All right. But this is really about, wouldn't it be nice that at the end of this research project, we can have something that we can share with everybody else. We can have some nice high quality resources, some teaching and learning approaches, something that could be embedded into the scheme of work, used by the teachers, something to take away. So that was our rationale behind this action research question. So finally, our action research question, we've got two actually. Our action research question were these. How can we improve students' problem solving skills through collaborative development tasks? But also, how do students respond to open-ended problem solving tasks that require independent thinking? And Lee Myring is going to talk about the second one now, and then followed by John, who'll talk about the first question. So over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Prakash. Can everybody hear me? I think we're okay. Okay, so the functional skills team was myself, Alison Marchmont and Paul Renisha. About 35 years experience in FE, possibly more. And we decided to concentrate on the question, how do students respond to open-ended problem-solving tasks requiring independent thinking? Thanks, John. So we decided to target, next slide, John, please. Thank you. We decided to target two major issues which we feel FE's facing, and we'll probably all have these issues with our students, but certainly over the last 15 years since the demise of the Key Skills portfolio, students' revision, study and research skills have declined. They simply struggle with those skills now. They've become too dependent on questions, and they do not retain the knowledge anymore, quite simply because they don't need it on their phone. Get it. Student dependency on the internet is also a big issue in FE. To try and get the students to put their mobile phones down is basically impossible. So we wanted to look at, can we get the students to be less dependent on technology and to start to problem solve and research the issues. Sorry, this chat's really putting me off, popping up at the bottom. Yes, so next slide, please, John. So what we decided to do is over 3 sessions, 3 sessions for each of the people involved in the project. The students were given an attitude questionnaire before the activity. The activity was a simple open-ended mathematical image. So for example, the first image was a rectangle showing a goat sort of walking around outside the rectangle. And each group was asked in small groups of 4 for 15 minutes. I want you to write down as much maths, keywords, questions, ideas that you can about that image. And then there was no lecturer help or input whatsoever. We left the groups to get on and to try and work. We decided to concentrate on 2 things. We were looking for student attitude towards maths and towards the activity, but also how quickly did students fall back onto their dependency on technology. After the activity, we gave feedback to the group, and it was hoped that over time we would see an increase in confidence, an improved attitude towards maths, and of course, hopefully a decrease in their dependency on technology. Thank you, John. So you'll see the results from the first one. So we had about 285 students in total took part in this experiment over 6 different curriculum areas, from motor vehicle care, performing arts, electrical engineering, sports and business. So of course this approach varied between the curriculum areas, which we might look at next year, but this is the average. If you look in the first lesson, 88% of our students said that they were going to pass maths, which I was really surprised about because the pass rate's only about 50%. So 88% seems quite high to me, but they were confident. They were given this problem solving activity, and if you can see in week 2, it dropped quite dramatically in some groups by up to 15%. So when I questioned the students about this, the response was, I didn't get the problem solving. If that's what we need to do in the exam, I'm going to fail. So that's why we see a decrease in level 2 in attitude. But you'll see then once they start to practice it, so they do it again in year 2, then in lesson 2, then we get to lesson 3, straight away attitude's starting to shoot up. The students are starting to get what they're being asked to do. They're starting to work together. The group dynamics are starting to work, and they're starting to learn how to work together as a group without technology. So if we look at the next slide, John. Thank you. You'll see now the reliance on technology. This was the most interesting thing for me. Mobile phones drive me insane when I'm trying to teach, and I'm sure we're all the same. But you'll notice in week 1, it took, on average, this is on average, remember, so some groups would have been less than a minute, but on average, it took members of the group 2 minutes to get out their phones and to start looking for answers. By the time we get to lesson 2, it took 5 minutes. And by the time we get to lesson 3, students are starting to leave their phones alone, and they're starting to problem solve. They are starting to understand what they're being asked to do. So we see a big increase. And of course, for both graphs, if you imagine that over the course of a year, we would expect a big shift in attitude, and we'd expect a big decrease in the use of technology, which of course they don't have in the exam, which is the big issue. So what's the point of this? Well, next year, John, please, we are going to change how we teach functional skills maths. So for the last, well, as long as I've been at Leicester College, 20 years, we've always had either 1 or 2 lessons a week, but it's the same format. A lesson covers the basics of fractions, for example. There's a demonstration, there's a video, there's Kahoot. The students have a go, And if anybody's struggling, I help them out as their teacher. Lesson 2, I then recap fractions. Students have another go at some of the questions. And again, I'm there on hand to help them out if they're struggling. There's absolutely no problem solving skills there. There's no need for the students to retain the knowledge because I'm there to help them if they're struggling. So we've decided to change that this year. Lesson 1 is now basically going to be a problem solving session where the teacher steps back and allows the students to completely take over the lesson. So the lesson is about problem solving using fractions, for example. The students are given a problem to solve. They work together and they're allowed to use their mobile phones and technology to find the methods to complete the task. The teacher's on hand, but pushes the students to research for the best methods to complete what they're being asked to complete. And then when we get to lesson 2, that's the traditional lesson 1 that we've probably all been teaching for a long time. That's the lesson where the teacher explains the best methods. It asks the students to tell us the methods that they've used. It's student led, but very much the teacher is now a facilitator of discussion instead of simply being the person who tells you how to do it and when to do it. Yes, David, we do have 2 lessons per week, hour and a half each. So that was it for functional skills. So this research has made a massive difference on the way that we look at how we teach functional skills. And for the last few weeks, we've been preparing for next year, however next year looks, but problem solving has been at the fore for the whole way through. So thank you for listening to the functional skills part. I will now pass you on to John for the GCSE.
How many of you would skip this question? Hopefully no one said yes to this, but if we were to pose the same to our students, what would you expect? Being honest, we know that most of them would straight away hit that panic button of theirs and mentally just leave the room. But why? We just need to pause and have a look at this and realise that a lot of knowledge isn't really required. We could solve this using a lot of the information available. The volume of a sphere, we've got half a sphere there, so we just need half of the formula or half the formula, and the rest is problem solving. And there's the hitch. Students really struggle with that aspect, don't they? And the same with wordy questions. They really just don't want to deal with it. So this is actually what we wanted to have a look at. How do we improve students' problem solving? And then working also with teachers in order to do this. And once we started, our colleagues in colleges in the area were really interested and also wanted to have a look at that. So this is what we considered. Our scheme of work, or scheme of learning, however you phrase it, is really, really busy. We've got a lot of things to look at. We've got 200 topics in GCSE maths to deliver in less than a year. It's impossible to do, but we try and do it, don't we? We get it all done, get it all delivered, and then we bombard our students with worksheets and online homeworks, and they have so much to look at. I think a lot of them just lose motivation and certainly can't deal with the rigors that is required in those grade 4, grade 5 questions, which are the problem solving mathematical reasoning type questions that they'll need to get a good grade. So what we wanted to do instead, rather than looking at what and when, which is everything all at once or in a different order, but essentially everything, we look at the 2 questions, which and how, certainly for this project anyway. The which suggests that we have a selection of topics that we'll look at, and that's what we do rather than what. And how can we teach these topics effectively? How can we get students to focus on the process and improve communication? How can we get students to see the links between the topics? How can we encourage thinking? That last bit would suggest that they need space for thought. So something that we've not really done before in our sessions. Well, there's no time for it. We just need to get on with it. So, how? This was going to be our plan for delivery. So the next session on delivery here, this is our deliver. So our planning stage will incorporate each of these bits. An engaging start. So it can't just be any starter plucked from the air, no matter how good it is. We need to consider what is the point of that starter. So it's got to be an engaging starter, and it has to link to the next session. So it could be, yes, pseudo-contextualizing, but fun. It could be a real-world example from an ad or a newspaper story or a personal story, but certainly it needs to then link to the next section. Section. And teacher as facilitator rather than teacher really outlines the teacher's role here then. So rather than standing out front and delivering stuff and giving them worksheets, the teacher is there to help the students to discuss the topic, reflect and get their strategies out in the open and talk with other students. And that can be quite difficult because we really want them to get to this solution. Sometimes we end up just giving them a solution and kind of guiding them to it or scaffolding it as well. So in the planning stage, we had to bear this in mind. So what we did was we structured in the quiet times and discussion times and built up the questions that we'd need to pose in order to get the students to think. And if it was quite painful, which it would be at the beginning, and just lots of silences, think of a prompt or a stimulus that would just get the odd one or two speaking, and then eventually just start joining in. And then when students get stuck, how would we then enhance that experience of talking and finding a solution? No holds barred, right? Maths is everywhere we had to include because students are constantly saying, what is the point in this? So we needed to prove to them that it is useful, it is there in the world. Apart from, of course, problem solving, which is what maths is, where else is the maths that they're learning, where has that been used? A specific topic. Maybe it's in technology or in certain careers, everyday careers. Plenary, yeah, perhaps we can get the students to just talk about it themselves. What did you learn from it? What did you think was good about the session? What didn't you like? Rather than simply, we learned this and this and this in a prescribed fashion, get the students to tell you what they've learned. Any observers there should be looking out for these things, and in particular, the teacher as facilitator part. What really went well here and what could be enhanced to make the session better? So the observations together with the teacher's own reflections of how the session went is part of the assessment. So not an assessment of students per se, but more an assessment of the session. And taking all these things together will be used to formulate the next stage of lesson parts, which are planning, which of course is the beginning. So we can see that the cycle of plan, deliver, assess, and each one feeds into the next. They're not separate aspects, but all very key parts. So that's it, folks. It went really, really well for us. We gained a lot of things from it. In particular, we're going to go into the next year using some of these hints and tips in order to plan our delivery, given more room for discussion and reflection. So I'm going to give it back to Prakash now. He's going to conclude and give you thoughts.
Yeah, just some final thoughts about the whole what we learned. We really found that this collaborative planning was a real strong form of professional development. We had some comments from some teachers, you know, who turned around and says, well, the following day I went into my lesson and I approached my lesson in a very different way as a result of the discussions we have. So there were some behavioral and mindset changes from staff as well. Some staff used techniques and resources that perhaps they never would have if they didn't engage in this action research. In total, we had about 7 action research groups. We had 24 practitioners taking part, 5 network partners. And what we saw at the end of it is that if problem solving is looked at carefully, built into the planning, embedded into the scheme of work, and given to students consistently, then this will definitely strongly promote thinking and problem solving. So that's what we found at the end of it.